Cool. All right, folks. Well, woo, first week of the month of May. I don't know if you can hear me, I'm saying. First week of the month of May. May you have many blessings. Woo. All right, folks. Well, thanks for showing up to class. It's our mundane Monday. May 4th. May 4th, Monday, mundane. So we got a lesson plan here. Let me jump into it. Thank you all for showing up today. It's wonderful. I'm glad you're here. Go ahead, take a seat. Okay. Let's see what we got. So we got some options. We got some options. I came a little late today. So I have 2 lessons. I think for this class, I'm counting how many we have here. Let's see, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 8 of us. There's about 8 of us in here, so I'm going to say, it's a tough call. Well, okay, this is what we're going to do, folks. We're going to read the next scene of Voracity. I think that's what we're going to do, and so excited to do that with you. I had another lesson where we would do a live lab of writing a script together. And I'd write it on the board here, and we would begin another script. But I don't think there's enough time for today, and not everyone is here in class, so I might have to wait till tomorrow or later this week to do that one. But for this one, we're going to read scene 10. If you remember, folks, we were at scene 9 in Voracity last time we were reading. So we're now in scene 10. If you remember where it ended, it was, she was in a dark room, right? We just had seen the montage of the descent of the poor mama. And she was, the last scene was her up against that wall in her room, in her apartment, and she's alone and in the darkness. And what will you do? That was that. Ended pretty grim. So, but the screen fades black, right? And then it jumps right into scene 10. So here we go. Scene 10. Pay attention now, guys. It's a good one. So scene 10, enter into from a black screen. Now we're inside the law firm building. Conference room, specifically. Okay, it's daytime. It's a conference room in the law firm that she's working for. But we don't have any context, all we have is the context. We're not just directly, obviously saying it. It's that we let the audience kind of figure out that she's got a career of some kind, if you have half a brain. Anyway, so, we got glass walls, we got the muted tones, the mundane, right? Office colors. There's a long, big table in this conference room, right? There's about 6 people at the table, okay, including her. And there's files spread out all over the place. There's highlighted sections on these pieces of paper, and there's tabs and all these legal pads of paper everywhere, and pens and highlighters, and what will you? And Mama sits. She's sitting right there. She's not standing yet. She's listening. And so now we see a man who seems to appear to be an attorney of some sort. And he says, what I'm saying is the report is admissible as is. There's no reason to challenge the timeline unless we're prepared to replace it. Okay, now there's also another man who's another attorney. So what's going on is there's a case going on, and that's why she's there, quite obviously. But the second attorney responds to him and says, and we're not. We don't have a competing expert. And then a third attorney, another man, is sitting there, and he says, even if we did, we are still dealing with checks his notes. 2 independent confirmations at time of death. So, and then it goes back to Mama. Mama flips a page. She's very calm. She's very collected. She knows exactly what's going on, right? And she kind of interrupts, and she says, "They're not independent." And no one in the room reacts immediately. But, here's her time to shine, right? She's speaking out. And so the first attorney, that first man we talked about, right, he jumps in again. He says, "They're from 2 different sources." Now looking at her. And she replies, "They're derived from the same assumption." And now the energy in the room is starting to change a little bit because, the big boys are talking, and here's Mama. She jumps in and says, no. And so here's the second attorney. He says, which is, and the mother jumps in, that the initial observation was correct. Boom. Attorney 3 jumps in. "You're saying the coroner's report is wrong?" "Mama, I'm saying it's built on a sequence no one verified." Silence. Silence. It's quiet after that. She slides the piece of paper forward. Whoop, right? Time of discovery is 9:42. She taps it. And the attorney, "Well, no one's arguing that." She says, "Well, then why are you treating it like it is?" "Well, ma'am, because," he doesn't say ma'am, but he says, "because a follow-up," that's the tone he has. The tone is very much trying to be respectful and professional and everything. He says, "Because the follow-up aligns with it." And she says, "Aligns doesn't mean confirms." And she leans back in her chair kind of slightly and still composed, but, a little under pressure, right? It's a high stakes meeting. I mean, we're talking about reports and someone's death, and information's got to be correct. And we've got 3 attorneys in the room and her. So, I mean, it's kind of an intense meeting, if you can imagine. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that. But it's very intense. And so, so now she's leaning back in her chair, and she's still composed. She looks at all 3 of them. She says, "You're stacking assumptions and calling it structure." And the third attorney, right, the third man sitting there, he says, okay. But even if we challenge that, what are we offering instead? Then she stands up. Controlled, kind of slow, stands up. "We're not offering a replacement." And the one attorney, then what are we doing? Now she moves around the table, kind of not necessarily anxious, but deliberate. She's got this kind of sway to her. She's taking control of the room. "We're removing certainty." And she kind of stops behind one of the attorneys. If their timeline isn't stable, their conclusion isn't either. And that attorney she's standing behind, he says, "Well, that's not enough." She looks down at him. "It is if the jury stops trusting the sequence." All right, that's the law. Then the third man. "You're asking them to ignore the medical findings?" And she quickly replies, "No, I'm asking them to question when those findings apply." She then returns to her seat and kind of, stands there, hands on the chair. You don't win this by proving something else happened. You win it by showing that what they think happened can't be proven in the order they're presenting. And the attorney, first attorney, so we're arguing sequence over substance, and she finally sits down. Sequence is substance. Sequence is substance. And they kind of shuffle through their papers, and they're flipping through their notes again, and the second attorney's kind of scratching his head, and he says, well, what about the footage? And she nods slightly. That's where it breaks. She pulls out another document and slides it forward. Security cam east entrance, timestamped at 9:51 p.m. The room shifts again. That's 9 minutes after the discovery. The attorney says, And one of the other attorneys says, could be a clock error. And she says, then it's unreliable. And he kind of replies, or the report is. And she kind of looks at him. And she says, now you're getting it. It's kind of this subtle moment of approval, if you will. Very precise moment there. And so now the third attorney jumps in. He says, so the argument is, she finishes for him, there was no confirmed moment. Silence. Again. And she's gathering her papers now. She's got this meeting in a bag, she's doing great. And that first attorney kind of jumps in, still asking questions. Well, and if they ask for a definitive timeline, she says, we don't give them one. We don't give them one. We show them why they shouldn't trust the one they have. And she opens the door. Then she goes to the door and just kind of exits. And the room stays quiet after she left, because these guys got the answer they wanted. And she was very good, very good. So that what the scene is doing, right, is it's conveying how effective she is as a consultant at this law firm. And these attorneys who have all these questions and who are trained to, break down finite details, if you will, she just totally conquers the room. And that's important that that's there. Now the respect has shifted, right? These guys really respect this woman now because she's on top of her game. So, there's scene 10. Now we're going to go to scene 11. But let me check my zooms. Zoomers. Woo! Well, yeah, we got a lot, a lot of dialogue in this scene, as you can notice. It's very nice. It's pretty good, folks. It's pretty good. Okay. Okay. We got our 10 minutes for our zooms, and then we get kicked out of Zoom. Because for whatever reason, I get kicked out of Zoom every 30 minutes. I do not know why. Okay. So that's scene 10, guys. That's scene 10. We're showing the control in Mama's life, right? She lost her son 30 years later. Now she's in control after losing control. Great contrast. So now here's scene 11. Still in the law firm, but she had left the office, right? Now she's in the executive office. And, we got kind of that warm wood, I guess I would say. Bookshelves that feel expensive. And the city skyline behind the glass window. And an older man sits behind this big, fancy desk, right? Late 60s. He's composed and observant. And this is Mr. Halverson. Okay, this is the boss. This is the big boy. This is the big boss. Big boss of the law firm, okay? And Mama stands across from him, relaxed but attentive. And he studies her for a moment before speaking, right? Just already, she's in the boss's office, and already there's a little bit of a quiet tension because she's, by her boss. And then he breaks the silence. He says, "You have a habit." And she says, "Do I?" And he replies, "You walk into a room where everyone's already convinced of something, and you quietly remove the ground it's standing on." And he gives kind of this subtle smile. And she says, "That's the job." And he leans back, slightly amused, basically giving her a good job. And anyway, he replies, he says, "No, the job is to argue." And he gestures lightly. You don't argue, you rearrange. It's irritating. And she almost smiles. And she says, "I'll try to be more difficult." And he says, "Don't. We don't promote difficult, we promote effective." And he stands now, slowly measured, kind of pulling back that gratitude, because he's the boss man. But still wanting to compliment her, right? And so he continues, he says, "And you're becoming annoyingly effective." And she holds the eye contact. She says, "I'll take that." And he moves towards the window, hands behind his back, right? Like this, looking out the window. "You keep this pace, you won't be consulting much longer." And she says, "That's supposed to motivate me?" He turns slightly and says, "It's supposed to warn you." Diana, which now we see the mom's name. For the first time it's mentioned. Mama, right? Her name is Diana. Dianne, Diane. Or Diana, whatever you want. He says, "Diana, people get comfortable being good at what they do. Then they stop noticing what it costs them." She doesn't respond this time. "Diane, don't get too attached to being right. It is a very lonely position." She says, "Understood." And he gestures towards the door. "Go make someone else uncomfortable." Kind of gives a smile. She turns and exits. So, she just had kind of a bittersweet conversation with her boss, but it was really a good meeting, because he's in a position of authority. He can't say "good job," or he can't just directly be like, "You, good job, you're awesome." He's smarter than that, right? He's going to act like he's kind of pissed off that the way she's working, but in reality, he's saying, outside of that surface level, right? He doesn't want to congratulate her too much because he knows strategically that that'll screw up things later on. This is how a boss thinks. They're very picky on how much praise they give to their employees. Anyway, so now she walks out. She's on the main floor now. And there's phones and quiet movement, and there's this professional rhythm of your average office. People walking in and out, and people talking on the phone, of course. And she walks through, feeling pretty good after that meeting. And she goes up to one of the clerks, leans over a desk, and she's typing fast. This clerk, and her name is Maya. Right? And so Maya looks up as Diane passes. And she says, hey, quick thing, Diane. And, Diane goes, "Yeah?" And she says, "That Easton file, you still want the supplemental exhibits in or just referenced? And she says, include them, but move them to the back. And Maya nods, typing as they talk. Got it. Also, you free later? Diane says, 4? Maya shrugs. I don't know, like anything that's not this? Diane almost smiles and says, probably not. And Maya glances at her. Wait, do you even have, like, a boyfriend? And Diane looks at her. No. Right? Little does Maya know, Diane's had a hell of a life. But Maya is younger, you know. Because Mama, Diane, she's like in her 40s now, right? And Maya is probably Diane's age when she had her son. So Maya's like 20. And so she looks at Diane and says, that's actually insane. And Diane kind of laughs, you know, in maturity, and says, well, I'm busy. And she says, yeah, but like, busy people still have lives. And Diane replies, debatable. And Maya laughs, okay, fair. And they both settle back into work mode. And Maya just says, I'll send you the updated file in an hour. And Diane says, thank you. And Diane moves on. So now, as Diana leaves Maya and the main floor, she heads to her office. She's in her office now. The next scene, Diane's in her own office. She's earned her own office, is what the audience is seeing. And it's nighttime outside now, right? You can see the city lights through the window. And her desk lamp is on. Paperwork everywhere. Kind of disorganized chaos. Your average day in a life for a consultant. And she sits at her desk, she's reading, she's marking, she's cross-reading and referencing and all this, and just working, you know. She's a hard worker. And a file is open in front of her, and we get a brief glimpse of it. We see timelines, inconsistencies, and all these notes written in sharp, precise handwriting. She kind of flips a page, and she's staring at this paper, and she stares a little longer than needed, because a certain phrase catches her. And she leans back slightly for a moment. Then she reaches forward and keeps working, page after page. Unstoppable. Unstoppable, but not alive in it, is the feeling you get from her working late at night. And so now we're just going to have this wide shot, this small figure in a large dark office surrounded by work, and she's completely alone. Cut to black. And so there we go. There's our scene. Now let's talk about that for a little bit now. There's a lot to unpack there. Scenes 10 and 11. I'm going to check my zooms now. Again, always got to check the zoomers.